Happy second Sunday of Lent. Back when I used to argue with people on Facebook about religion and all sorts of things, I remember one of the questions that came up regularly was, why is God so good if he demands suffering? And I think these readings this weekend kind of point to that conundrum in our own spiritual lives, maybe. So the first reading, it's the reading of Isaac's sacrifice, of Abraham sacrificing Isaac. And the second reason talks about if God is for us, who can be against us? Because he didn't even spare his own son, but handed him over for us all. Um, and so, again, some people can look at those things, those sacrificial offerings of sons, even God's own son, and say, that doesn't sound like a God I want to have anything to do with. But I think we're missing the point. As Western thinking people, as people who live in the United States, we have a certain way of thinking that would not have been evident to those early Jewish writers, either in the book of Genesis or in St. Paul's letters. Because the point that's being made is less about sacrificing your child and how barbaric that used to be. It was a very barbaric thing, and there were people who were sacrificing children in the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But actually, what the story is pointing to is the fact that God doesn't want human sacrifice. But as one of the Psalms puts it, what God wants is a humble and contrite heart. So the point of sacrifice is always supposed to be salvific, it's like a purgatory in a sense, because we're trying to get rid of our attachments, ultimately, is what's going on. I think the point of the Genesis story is more God pointing to Abraham and saying, I have promised you everything through this child of yours. I have told you that I will make a great nation out of you, and now I want you to give me that back. I know it's your heart's desire to have a child because you're over 100 years old when you finally had this child, and I want you to give it back to me. Why would God do that? Not because he's mean or vindictive or anything like that, but he's trying to make us free. That's why we give up things for Lent, why we make sacrifices, not because God is mean, but to help us learn how to be free. If I can, on a simple level, if I can deny myself the chocolate or whatever else food-wise I might give up for Lent, I'm teaching myself to be more free. Because usually I may walk by that chocolate and say, oh, yeah, sure, and unthinkingly just eat it. But when you've made a conscious decision to say no to something, you're training yourself to be able to say no to even bigger things down the line. This is really about a battle with sin and pride and entitlism and all of that. The more I say no to myself, the more free I am to say yes to whatever comes my way. One of the things that I have to constantly wrestle with in my own person is people pleasing. Especially, when I was acting as an active priest, one of the temptations is always to concede to whatever the person wants because it might make them happy or they might like me more or whatever else. But what if that's not congruent with my principles, my beliefs, what I think is right and wrong? Then there's a tension there. So again, God isn't asking of the sacrifice of his son or Abraham's son or your son or anybody's child or anything because he's mean, but in order to make us more free. Another way to put it is when Ignatius talked about, he has this term in Latin called agere contra. St. Ignatius is a spiritual genius. But whenever you're looking at your own personal life, look at the thing that brings you the most tension. As a priest, one of the examples was, I'm being asked to change parishes. Should I stay here or go to a different parish? And the thing I need to wrestle with in myself with a question like that is, why is there tension? Why do I feel pulled to this one and pushed from that one? Is there some sort of bias there? Or is it God actually calling me to this thing? Because ultimately, this is all for freedom. Again, if I'm so caught up in my biases or just like autopilot with life, then I'm not free to make any decisions. I'm just going off of my instincts. But we're rational beings. So again, we sacrifice things, especially in Lent, to make us more free, not because God is mean and wants us to suffer, but so we're free to choose anything. It's just like athletes deny themselves food, like St. Paul says. We deny ourselves all sorts of things for something better, even if sometimes that means denying ourselves one good thing for a better thing. I hope you're having a blessed Lent and keep striving to stay close to the Lord.